Well, good morning from Longreach, Australia. Welcome to our SouthernAirs vlog, brought to you by me, Jack Force One, at your service as always. So basically, I'm going to the Qantas Founders Museum later this morning, and then I'm going to be shooting a vlog there. I'm currently staying in my Outback accommodation here in Longreach. It's been a very nice. It's called the Staging Post, and they've taken the Outback theme and certainly ran with it. Although to be honest, I know it's not to everyone's taste. I love it. You know, like I'm out here in the actual Australian Outback in Queensland. So glad this thing's been working all day. Yeah, overall pretty happy with this place. I'll be going to the Qantas Founders Museum in a bit, and I'll catch up with you there. Here we are, Qantas Founders Museum, and I'm about to go on the tour, and I should be windwalking on this 747-200 a little later on. Whether I can film any of that, I don't know. Find out as we go along. The museum is about to open, so I'll head over to the main entrance, which is just in front of me in a moment. But as you can see, I've got my 747 there. There's a 707, DC-3 Dakota, and there's a Constellation at the back here somewhere. But there's more to see in the hangars over there too, which are right over here. Right, let's get cracking. So this plane is an Avro 504. This is an aeroplane similar to what Qantas would have used during their first years of operation. To think the sort of planes operating now, this is where it all began for them in 1920, over 100 years ago. In an adjacent room there was this nice collection of Qantas uniforms throughout the decades, and just outside of it was a pretty vintage route map that Qantas would have used to showcase their routes back in the pre-digital days. This engine here is the same type of engine that would have been used in the Boeing 707, which for many airlines was, in the West, was the entry into the jet age. This particular engine's been donated by the Royal Australian Air Force, so I don't know if it's come from a military version of the 707 or if it's come from a different aeroplane, but this is the sort of engine 707s in the 60s and flying for Qantas, BOAC, Pan Am, Air France all used them. And by comparison over here is the type of engine used in a Dakota, a DC-3. Let's look at the comparison. This big beast of British steel is a Rolls-Royce engine RB211, and this was the engines, or the engine design, that powered the Boeing 747 in the Qantas fleet from 1971 2020 across various models, including the one that we're going to see outside in a few minutes. So I'm standing behind, or should I say beside, a replica Gypsy Moth de Havilland plane that Qantas used early on in their fleet. So the pilot used to sit exposed like they would on old World War I and post-war planes. But this was one of the first planes where passengers actually were able to sit in a comfortable modern cabin as we know today. So let's go have a look inside quickly.
after exploring the vintage Qantas planes in the vintage 1920s hangar, it was over to the main pavilion to tour the aeroplanes, starting off with the iconic 1950s Lockheed Constellation. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, the Lockheed Constellation shrank the world for Qantas prior to the introduction of the first generation jet airliners. Qantas pilots used to nickname the Constellation the world's greatest three-engine plane, as the four-engine Constellation was prone to engine trouble throughout its entire run.
Yeah. Oh, this was full on.
And now for a real gem in the Qantas Founders Museum collection. This is their very first Boeing 707. This plane was delivered in the early 1960s to the airline, and it was the very first jet aircraft to enter service with the airline. It flew for over a decade for Qantas before being retired, and it ended up flying as a VIP plane for a number of years until it found its way to London Southend, where it was stored for the best part of a decade. In the mid-2000s, Qantas restored the plane and flew it to the Qantas Founders Museum, where it's been one of the pride and joys of the museum's collection since. The interior of the 707 is configured as a VIP plane, which it was at the time of its retirement. An interesting story goes that the 707 was advertised to a Saudi Arabian royal family as a VIP plane. However, because they used pig leather, the royal family decided not to buy the plane. A simple mistake, but it cost the owners of the plane a few million. And of course, the Queen of the Skies herself. Qantas donated this Boeing 747-200 to the museum in 2002 when the airline was retiring its first generation 747-200 fleet. As you can see, a very basic and very different interior to what we're used to in the 21st century, considering this is the sort of cabin that Qantas would have had on their 747s during the 90s and 80s. The Qantas 747 fleet had three cabins in the fuselage. They had economy seats, which made up the bulk of the cabin, premium economy, and business class. Oh, this looks so outdated compared to what I've seen in the last few years. One of the coolest things about visiting an old 747-200 or even a 100 design is the fact that you get to ascend the iconic spiral staircase.
One more thing to do and then we'll be back.
So the pilots do all these buttons as well?
That's your flight engineer there.
Oh, they've
He
got
was a
this
separate job
on.
again. Yeah.
One of the coolest things about this 747 is that if you buy the correct package, you can do a wing walk experience on this very 747. Very much a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I dived in for a ticket, hook, line and sinker. So there you have it. You've probably just seen the footage I shared, but I've been out on the wing of this Boeing 747. The next guys are just heading out now. Incredible experience. Apparently you can do this down in South Africa at the Rand Airport Museum, but I've not been there, so I can't verify that, but I'm sure someone in the comments will let me know. I hope you've enjoyed following me along here at the Qantas Founders Museum, and I will share a couple of clips on my flight back to Brisbane, which I'm going to be jumping on in the next 2 hours. There's also this amazing view of the pavilion from a purpose-built deck in the museum, and I tell you what, there are fantastic views of the vintage aircraft on the pavilion, and it is so amazing to see the planes at such a unique angle. Very big thank you to the Qantas Founders Museum for the tour and allowing me to visit on this occasion. It has been an absolute pleasure. As we come to the end of this travel vlog, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, we would really appreciate it. And with this trip concluded in Longreach, it was time to head back to Brisbane and pick up the trip. And as we flew out of Longreach, it was nice to see one last look at the Qantas Founders Museum, the home of Qantas.